understand the passage. Herod had gotten himself in a pickle. He wanted to kill John the Baptist, but because of the people liked him so much and thought he was a prophet, he decided not to. But then he had a party, and he promised a young girl that, and he liked the party so much, what happened at the party, that he made an oath to a young girl that he would do what she wanted, give her anything. So she asked for John the Baptist's head on a platter. So, although he didn't want to have him killed, he did. And they served John the Baptist's head on a platter. And when the disciples saw this, they reclaimed his body and buried it, and then they went to tell Jesus. And that's what happened right before this. Jesus feeds the 5,000. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew back, though privately, to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said. And he directed the people to sit on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Thanks be to God.
As a parent, there's a part of this story that I really relate to. But before I talk about me, I better talk about Jesus, right? That seems like an appropriate order of things. On this particular day, Jesus needed some me time, like alone time. And Terry did a good job of explaining why. He got the news that John the Baptist had been killed. And John the Baptist wasn't just another leader that Jesus respected, it was also his cousin. So we might safely assume that Jesus felt grief. I mean, he was sad. So he decides that he needs to go off, find a deserted place, be alone. Just Jesus and God, peace and quiet to soothe his soul and to pray. Jesus gets in a boat to sail across to another place along the Sea of Galilee. Because if you really need some quiet time, what better way to get it than to get in a vehicle alone and go away? And I imagine Jesus as he's cruising along the sea. He's tired, he's soul weary, like emotionally tired. And maybe in his mind, he's already going to that deserted place. In his mind, he's already mentally picking out the particular spot and imagining himself sitting on the shore and just watching the waves lap in and taking a whole day just to be some me time. But as he turns the boat toward the shore and his deserted place comes into view, it is not deserted at all. There's a whole crowd there. And it turns out that while Jesus has been sailing, the crowds have been running. Jesus wants me time, and the crowds want Jesus time. They want healing. They want teaching. They want Jesus. Poor Jesus pulls into the shore to get the me time he needs, and instead all of this. That kind of moment happens a lot as a parent. As a parent, there's very little me time. And I think especially this happens in the very early years of parenthood. For me, it was a surprise and use the bathroom by themselves, they just become less maintenance. And that is not at all how it works. Because around the age of 1, they are fully capable of walking and completely incapable of following verbal directions. They're just little moving tornadoes. Adorable tornadoes, but little moving tornadoes. And at that stage, for Alan and I, when our kids were that little, that was very hard parenting for me. Because there is no eating your own full meal, or sitting down, or finishing a complete sentence to another adult. There is only watching this tiny person until blessed sleep comes. That is it. And I had no idea how far to the edge of sanity that those parenting years would push me. I remember being hungry, so hungry, and all I want to do is sit down and make a snack and eat it in silence, but someone spills a cup of milk and that has to be cleaned up. I remember trying to get dressed in the morning, and all I want is 5 minutes. 5 minutes to put together some kind of outfit, but the infant is crying, and then the toddler has hit her head on something, and just put whatever you can on and go. I remember those moments and being on the verge of insanity. But closer to what Jesus goes through here, I also remember being emotionally depleted and wanting some me time, and there's really not a chance for that. To have a hard conversation at the end of the day, right before I pick up the kids. And I'd really like to just go home and sit and reflect, maybe write in my journal about it, but no, that is not an option. Or to go through grief, to have my soul heavy and weary. And I'd really like to just hide under the covers in my bed for a few hours. But when you're a parent, that's not an option. I can clearly remember going through some of these moments in early parenthood. And it was almost like watching myself from an out-of-body experience. As I get up from my comfortable chair with what little energy I have left to go and attend to some need, and watching myself and thinking, I don't even know how I'm doing this right now, because I have nothing left. How am I still doing this? And I'll tell you how. I can tell you in one word. Compassion. Compassion is the concern for another person's feelings. And that's what drives a parent. That's what makes a parent set aside his or her own needs and attend to the needs of their beautiful little people. Even when a parent is tired, exhausted, grieving, hurting, whatever. Compassion is what drives us to still care for others, even in the midst of our own need to be cared for. And compassion is exactly what Jesus had for the crowds on this particular day. In Matthew 14, that's exactly the word that it uses. Jesus hits the shore of his boat, and he doesn't run away. He doesn't go hide in the bathroom, or at least that's the standard parenting trick I use. Jesus meets the crowd, he sees them, and it says he had compassion for them. In other words, he had concern for their needs over his. And so he throws his plans for a nice day off out the window, and instead spends the whole day healing and teaching and being with them as they needed. Compassion is what drove Christ to care for the crowds. And as though to nail that point home, when this story repeats again in Matthew 15, when Jesus feeds another large crowd there, it's the same thing. Exactly the same thing. It says that Jesus is motivated by compassion to minister to them and to feed them. to a child. The concern for someone else's feelings that causes God to set aside God's own needs, to give everything, literally everything on the cross, in order to meet our needs. God loves us with the unbreakable compassion of a perfect parent. That is amazing. But the real invitation of the story today is not just for us to receive that compassion, although we should, but the real invitation is for us to participate in that compassion, to be partners with Christ for compassion. And I know that because that's exactly what Christ did with the disciples. They're in the story too. It doesn't really tell us if Jesus intended to take them along with him on this day apart, but at the least, maybe they thought they were getting a day off, a little break from their ministry. And then plans change. And we know that they're there with Jesus at the theoretical deserted place that ended up populated by a crowd. They've been with him all day, patiently sitting with him, sitting in the hot sun as he healed and taught and worked with the people, until finally they start to notice, mercifully, the sun is getting low in the horizon. And surely, this will mean that their work is done. So imagine one of them going up to Jesus, interrupting him. Oh, Jesus, sorry, can you just wait just a minute? Jesus, hey, good work today. Wow, really, we all thought we were going to have a day off. You've really pushed through. This has been great. But look, it's getting really late, and we're like 2 hours from anywhere here, and these people are going to have to eat. And have you noticed? Great crowd today, by the way. There's like thousands of people here. So what do you say? Let's call it a day. We'll send everyone home. We can finally go get that break we've been wanting. But this is not what Jesus does. The logical response to that is yes. Let's take a break. Let's send them home. Let's utilize this opportunity to end this and have some time for ourselves. But Jesus doesn't make the logical answer. He makes the compassionate answer. And what's more, he puts it on the disciples. He asks them to act out of compassion. He asks them to see the crowd and feel concerned for them and do something about it. And what he says is, you feed them. Can you imagine their response? I mean, I can, because I'm like the logical, rational person. I have a plan for things. And so if I was a disciple, my reaction would have been much the same. Us feed them? Are you crazy? We did not budget for this last year. There's nothing to provide for feeding 5,000 people on this day. Look, Jesus, all we have are 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. There's no way we can feed a crowd like this. It is not enough. And not enough is often our barrier to compassion. But Jesus blows right through that. Jesus insists, well, give me the loaves and the fish. And let's see how far your not enough will go. So he takes them and breaks them and blesses them and shares them. And you know what happens. At the end, not only is there enough, there is an abundance. There's leftovers for days. Compassion turned not enough into more than enough in the hands of Jesus Christ. And this is what we're invited to participate in as his disciples as well. We are called to see those around us with compassion, for family and the human race, to see all people and to allow ourselves to feel compassion. A compassion that gives us concern for them. And when we see the problems of other people, and we feel genuine concern, our reaction might be much like the disciples. To say, those problems are too big, and I do not have enough to do anything about it. I don't have enough time, enough money, enough smarts. I don't have enough to do anything about the problems of another. But where Jesus Christ is concerned, we don't have to have enough in our own little baskets. What we're called to do is simply offer it up out of compassion and invite God to bless it. But this is hard. And I know it's hard because as I wrote this sermon this week, it dawned on me pretty quickly that all my parenting examples have been past tense. All of the moments of great sacrifice that I thought of were from the years when our children were even littler. Those one-year-old frenzied years, when they're so small they literally can't do anything for themselves. And in those years, they need us. I mean, diapers have to be changed and bottles have to be made, and they can't do anything without us. In those years, it was impossible not to act out of compassion. Now that they are of the mature ages of 6.5 and 4, they've learned how to do a few things. I mean, they're clearing their dishes from the table. They're working at getting themselves dressed. And that's good. That is so good. But the bad part is that I've realized it gives me the choice, the option to not respond out of compassion. I can stay seated on my comfortable seat on the couch and delay their request a lot of the time. And that's not always bad, but compassion is always good. And I want to choose compassion. The way I'm choosing compassion now as a parent is more the way it works for us in the world. Because in most situations, we have the option to respond or not. We have the option to see someone else's problems and care or not. And most of the time, there's a voice that will kick in really quickly to justify that we don't have to do anything, really. A voice that will tell us, oh, you don't have enough to do anything about that. You're too busy. You don't have enough money. You don't know how to solve that problem. You've already done plenty. Don't worry about that. But if we listen carefully, we might hear another voice. The voice of the Holy Spirit that comes in a whisper and says, care about them. Care about that person. No, you don't have enough to solve all their problems. But what you have is something. Care about that person. Have compassion for them. Do something. Even if you're too tired, too poor, too whatever. Do something. The way of Jesus Christ is a way of compassion. That's how Christ